Welcome everyone. We are exploring the second part of Annie Besant's book, Life, Death and After. And the second part is about the heavenly state, known in Theosophical literature as Devachan. In our previous class, we saw an introduction to the subject, and today we are going to look into this state more in particular. So let us start by looking at the process of entering Devachan, entering in this state. Annie Besant says, we have seen that after physical death, consciousness is in a peaceful, dreamy state in Kamaloka, the desire land. So in our previous series, we explored this state of Kamaloka, which can be translated, as Annie Besant does, as desire land. As I mentioned last week, a person that is not too attached to objects, to emotions, to physical desires, will go through Kamaloka in a peaceful, dreamy state, as Annie Besant says. And then there will be a process by which consciousness is regained in Devachan. If the person is more attached to the physical plane and to emotions and passions, then there may be varying degrees of consciousness in Kamaloka, which may delay the entrance in the heavenly state. Now, she continues, once the consciousness of a person shakes off its desire garment, it crosses the threshold of Devachan, becoming a Devachani. So remember that in Kamaloka, we lost the physical body, and now the vehicle of consciousness that in which we are in Kamaloka is the emotional body. And that Kamaloka is a kind of period where all the thoughts and emotions that had to do more with our material existence are sifted from the thoughts and emotions that have to do with a higher aspiration, with things connected to love, aspirations for the artistic or for understanding life or ideas. All that has to do more with the higher mind and emotions than with the thoughts and emotions connected to the physical. So once in this period of purgation, that separation is made between the personal emotions and the more emotions and thoughts and the more spiritual, psychological activity. And then the threshold of Devachan, as Annie Besant says, is crossed. Devachan takes place on a higher plane than the Kamaloka. The Kamaloka, it's a state in what it's called the astral plane, which is the plane that is immediately above. And by above, I don't mean in height, but above in vibration, let's say. So the astral plane is the one that is immediately above the physical. That's where Kamaloka takes place. And Devachan begins or takes place in the mental level, mental plane, which is above the astral. And then Annie Besant says, now this consciousness has passed beyond recall to earth. Because we have seen in the previous session that as long as consciousness is on the astral plane in Kamaloka, it can be recalled by mediumship, for example, or by strong emotions and attachment from the people left behind. It can be, that person can be awakened in Kamaloka and his or her attention be drawn to the physical plane, something that is in general is not healthy for anybody really. So the best that we can do after a person passed is to send that person love. And of course, we may have a feeling of loss. Of course, we may have a sense of missing the physical presence, but with an understanding that this is something that is important for the person that passed, that the process happens in the right way, let's say, and that we still can be in touch with the person that passed, not by bringing their attention here, but by when we go to sleep, as I mentioned in the previous class, we are in our astral body while the physical body is left behind asleep. And we are naturally on the same planes that people who left the physical body for good, people whose bodies died, the same plane where they are. And there is normally a natural relationship. If the person is aware on the astral plane, there is a relationship on the astral plane. If the person is aware on the devachanic plane, then that relationship can happen on that plane. Of course, this is quite complex and requires, or there are many conditions that limit there. But in any case, the connection between souls is never lost, and we are going to see something of that. Now, when consciousness goes into Devachan, then that person is safe in the sense that his or her attention cannot be brought back to pay attention to the physical plane, because there is like a gulf in between. You have the mental plane, then you have the astral, and then the physical. And this Devachani doesn't have any astral vehicle of consciousness to be able to transmit, let's say, the call from the physical to the astral to the mental plane. So there is like a gap there, which keeps people in Devachan protected. This is important because, as we are going to see, Devachan is a state of bliss. Now, could there be bliss if the person that is in Devachan remains aware of what is going on the physical plane? Imagine that a mother dies and leaves behind small children that perhaps are not well taken care of. How could that mother, being aware of what happens on the physical plane, how could she be happy? It wouldn't be possible. And we can understand and imagine a lot of situations where the person that passed, if that person is still aware of those loved ones left behind, whenever the loved ones are in trouble or suffering, etc., that would make it impossible for the person in Devachan to be happy. Now, as we proceed, we will understand in what way, this makes sense and is fair and is actually a blessing that nature brings, without necessarily meaning that we are completely isolated from the people that we love. But we will see that later. So Annie Besant says, now that consciousness enters in Devachan, it passes beyond recall to earth. And then she continues, an embodied soul, that is a person that is alive, or that whose body is alive. This is a problem when we say a person is alive because the soul is inhabiting a physical body. That is not quite correct. The person as a soul is always alive. It may be alive on the physical plane, it may be alive on the astral plane or on the mental plane. So it's not quite correct to say a person who is alive and just keep it for the physical plane. So Annie Besant says, the embodied soul, the soul that is using a physical body, which is alive, may rise to Devachan. But the Devachani, as Annie Besant says, cannot be drawn back to our world. So there is still the possibility of keeping a relationship, but not by trying to bring the person that had has passed to the physical plane. Now, this relationship, we looked at this in the previous series, this relationship, even though it may take place, most people at this point in evolution are not able to recall the kind of relationship that they may have while the body is asleep with loved ones that have left the physical plane. Because when consciousness comes back into the body, it's not that easy to impress on the physical brain the memory of the activities that we have outside of the physical body. The brain has not participated in any of our experiences that we have outside the physical body. Therefore, when we come back, we have to impress all that memory in the brain, and a brain that is asleep, a brain that is normally the brain in many people, when the process of waking up begins to happen, the brain has some kind of incoherent activity, it's like starting up the machinery. So there is the need of a specific training to retain a memory. Nevertheless, the fact that we don't remember doesn't mean that we don't have the experience. And there are people who do remember, or many people do remember at least one or two instances where they dream of the person that passed. And in many occasions, it's not something that their minds made up. It's a real experience. It's a fragment of memory of a real experience. Now, Besant says that this passage from the astral plane to the devachanic plane, the mental plane, implies, she says, a second death, which is a condition of pre-devachanic unconsciousness, otherwise spoken of in Theosophical literature as the gestation period, because it precedes the birth of the, remember, ego comes from the Greek, it means I-ness, the sense of I-ness. So there is this second death in which consciousness falls unconscious, or the person falls unconscious, this pre-devachanic unconsciousness. And during this period, there is a kind of rearrangement of the vehicles of consciousness of the person. The person is letting go of the astral body, the emotional body, and now rearranging a new body by means of which that person can experience devachan. So it's rearranging a kind of spiritual body, and that takes time, and that is what is called the gestation period. And all this happens unconsciously, just like when our physical body is being gestated, let's say, in the womb of the mother, but we are not aware as a soul. We are not in the womb with self-awareness. Of course, the fetus is aware of external stimuli, but that is more of a physical consciousness. In a similar way, the person that is in the period of gestation to be born in the vachan is in a state of unconsciousness. And Annie Besant continues, regarded from the earth sphere, the passage from the astral plane to the devachanic plane is death, while regarded from that of devachan, it is birth. So we have this constant death and birth are the same thing, but looked at from different points of view. What we call birth, the birth of the physical body, is also a death. It's the death of the soul to its life on the inner planes. The soul again falls into unconsciousness and then is born in the physical body, and it takes a few years to regain consciousness now on the physical plane. So death and birth are simply the two sides of the same coin. And people who are aware on the astral plane, when they sense that the moment to move on to devachan approaches, Sometimes they, especially if they are aware, is because they are still with materialistic tendencies, let's say. They are attached to life within the emotions, within the physical sensations. So when they sense that the time comes for them to move on, they many times develop a similar fear of death as they did on the physical plane, even though now they have the experience that the body died and they are still alive. And even though there may be people working on the astral plane telling them that it is fine, that the same will happen, they will fall into unconsciousness and then wake up fully conscious on a higher plane with a far more blissful experience that they could ever experience on the astral plane. Even then, many people are still afraid, and they can delay the astral death. This is far easier to delay things on the astral plane than on the physical, because the astral plane the astral body doesn't need so much energy to survive. So the will to remain there can delay the passage to Devachan for even centuries. So if the person is aware on the astral plane, this is a second death, which is, as Annie Besant says, the prelude to a rebirth in the land of the gods, in Devachan. And then she says, the life of the Devachani has been explained by a master of wisdom as follows. And these are words from one of Blavatsky's teachers. As in actual earth life, so there is for the ego in Devachan, the first flutter of psychic life, the attainment of prime, the gradual exhaustion of force, passing into semi-consciousness, lethargy, total oblivion, and not death, but birth into another earthly personality. So what he's saying there is that our life on the Devachanic plane has the same qualities than our life on the physical plane. There is a beginning, the first flutter of psychic life. By psychic, he means a life that is without a physical body, because the physical body has died. So there is the gradual awakening in the Devachanic plane, then a gradual development and deepening of the experience. And then after some time, depending previous conditions, the life in Devachan begins to wane. Eventually, the soul falls again into semi-consciousness and then in total unconsciousness. And then we have the death to the Devachanic experience and the birth on the physical plane in another personality. And then the master says, with this, there is a resumption of action which daily begets new causes, which will have to be worked out in another term of Devachan, and still another physical birth as a new personality. So this is the cycle. As when we as souls are born in a physical body, we start again producing new causes. Those causes, karmic causes, some of them will start generating a Devachan. In order to be able to experience the effects of spiritual causes, those effects cannot be experienced on the physical plane because they are too spiritual, and the physical plane cannot afford opportunities to experience those effects. So we need a Devachan in order to experience the effects. There cannot be in the universe a cause without an effect. This is a law. So if we generate a cause, we will be dragged, let's say, by nature to whatever plane is necessary to experience the effects of those causes. So if we generate only causes that have to do with the physical plane, then we will be dragged to the physical plane with little interval to experience those causes. or if our causes have to do more with passions, then we will be kept awake on the astral plane, kama loka, because we have generated strong causes for passions, for example, which can only be experienced on the astral plane. If we generate spiritual causes, then we will be taken to the devachanic plane, because only there we can receive the effects of the spiritual causes. So that's how it works. So let's look at this entity that enters Devachan. Besant says the Devachani is generally spoken of as the immortal triad. Remember that in our last class we saw the three higher principles in Sanskrit, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, which were the self, the source of spiritual will, that's Atma. Then Buddhi is the source of spiritual intuition, and Manas is the source of spiritual understanding, intelligence. And this is the part of us that is permanent. And that is essentially what the Devachani is, the immortal triad, Besant continues, where Buddhi and Manas are united with Atma overshadowing them. So if we want to create a diagram, we could say that Atma is the self that is overshadowing, is like the word overshadow in Theosophical literature. Blavatsky used it rather frequently for these kind of subjects. And by that, she meant like a protection, like something that embraces the lower principles. So Atman is there like a womb, perhaps. And within that womb, we have the two principles of Buddhi and Manas, which after death unite. Right now, we are using Manas, the mind. We are using what we call the lower Manas, the lower mind, which is that aspect of the spiritual mind that is expressing itself through the brain. The brain imposes a lot of limitations on the spiritual mind, so that we forget our spiritual nature, we forget or lose for the time being our omniscience, the ability to see things as they really are, because now we are perceiving the world through the brain and all the heavy limitations that the brain imposes on us as consciousness. Therefore, our lower mind is separated from Buddhi and even from the higher mind. In the process of evolution, that separation begins to diminish. Gradually, the lower mind and the higher mind are united, so that even when we operate through the brain, we retain enough of our higher mind to live according to what we really are on the spiritual planes. And then as evolution proceeds, even Buddhi begins to be able to be expressed on a continuous basis through the brain. But before reaching that point, during daily life, Buddhi and Manas are separated. After death, because we got rid of the body, we got rid of the emotions and the thoughts and the mental activity that is concerned with the material personality. Now, what happens basically is that we as consciousness, as a soul, the higher Manas, have no obstacles to unite ourselves with Buddhi. So there is this union between our spiritual intuition and our spiritual understanding, let's say. However, if you see there is some, so Buddhi, Blavatsky would represent it as a golden color, Atma as a white color, higher Manas as a blue color, deep blue, and then lower Manas as green. So if you see in this diagram, there is some greenish at the bottom, and that represents the fact that in Devachan, there is part of the lower mind that is brought to Devachan, and that is what we are going to explore now. So Annie Besant says lower manas, the activity of our brain mind, let's say brain mind, the mind that is operating through the brain, as we go through life, we have all kinds of activities, all kinds of thoughts and emotions. Some are very lofty, some others are maybe very selfish, etc. So after we die, we have a mental body and an emotional body that has mixed all kinds of vibrations for the spiritual and vibrations for the selfish. We saw that in Kamaloka, there is a separation between those vibrations, so that when we are born in Devachan, we take with us only the most spiritual vibrations that were produced by our mental and emotional activity. Only our highest spiritual, mental, and emotional activity is taken to Devachan. So this is why Annie Besant says the lower manas is purified from all passional elements in Kamaloka, so that consciousness carries into Devachan only the pure and noble experiences of the earth life. So this is what I just explained. It's like you take the whole of our mental and emotional life, and you get the pure and the noble that came out of that life. Of course, in some people, that may be a lot. Maybe most of their activity would fall on that side. In other people, maybe there is very little of that, because their lives were selfish and cruel and self-centered, etc. It depends. This is what makes a difference of how useful an incarnation is for the soul, because the soul can only retain whatever is noble and pure. Now, this has an effect on the experience of Devachan, because, as Annie Besant says, this maintains the past personality as the marked characteristic of the Devachani, and it is in this prolongation of the personal ego, so to speak, that the illusion of the Devachani consists. We will see this more in detail. When Blavatsky and her teachers would talk about Devachan, they would say that Devachan is still part of the illusion. And some early theosophists got to think that Devachan was more illusory than the physical life. Because of our materialistic tendencies, we regard physical life as real, and then Devachan is a kind of illusion that we fall into when we are in Devachan until we come back to earth, to the real world again. The truth is the opposite, and the world, the life on Devachan is, as we are going to see, is more real than the one on the physical plane. But we need, because the early theosophical literature mentions that Devachan is an illusion, then people got that impression, or their natural materialistic tendency to look at this seemed to be supported by the idea that Devachan is an illusion. So Besant will explain in what sense Devachan is an illusion. Part of this is that the food for the experience in Devachan, in most people, is the remnants of the physical life that has just ended, a few years ago or many years ago, depending on how long the stay in Kamaloka was. So the support for this new life in Devachan is still conditioned by the experiences of the previous personality. In general, unless we are talking about later stages in the evolution of the soul in general is not in Devachan with a full knowledge of itself as a soul, but is in Devachan still conditioned by the previous personality, as I said. We will see what that means. Annie Besant says, if the manasic entity, the higher manas, if the soul, if the manasic entity were free from all illusion, it would see all egos, all other souls, as its brother souls, and looking back over its past, would recognize all the varied relationships it had borne to others in many lives, as the actor would remember the many parts he had played with other actors, and would think of each brother actor as a man and not in the parts he had played as his father, his son, his judge, his murderer, his master, his friend. So she's saying, if a soul is evolved enough so that the devachan of that soul is not conditioned by the previous personality, the soul would see all other souls. The devachanic plane, the higher mental plane, is the abode of all souls, whether those souls are animated in a physical body at the moment or not. That is the land of the gods. That is the land of the souls. So a person that after dying would be aware on the higher mental plane and look around, let's say, of course, we are talking about a plane that is beyond forms as we know them. So all these kind of words we use are allegorical, adapted to the kind of perceptions that we know on the physical plane. So let's say a soul that is not wrapped in the illusion of the previous personality would look around and recognize other souls as souls, and would recognize, I have had experiences with these souls in that previous lifetime, and I had experience with that soul in another or in several other previous lifetimes. There would be a relationship between souls without being conditioned by the last life. But that is not the case in most people. Most people can be aware on devachan only using the experiences that they gathered during the past lifetime. So, for example, after I die and I am in devachan, if I am conditioned by my last lifetime, when I look around, I may see my father, my mother, my friends, etc., and I see them not as the soul, but I see the soul wrapped in the particular personality with which I related to in my previous life. So you see, it is a little like, let's put the example of the actor that Annie Besant brings here. Suppose an actor, he plays with a lot of people, the play is over, and then they go out together and they are all without their costumes, without their characters, and they know each other as people. But in what happens in devachan until we reach a certain stage of evolution is that it's like the play is over and we all go back, go into the world, but we keep playing the roles that we had before. So the actor that played my enemy, I don't want to talk to him or her. And I want to talk only to the people who played my friend, even though beyond the particular role that we assume, we are all friends. But for some reason, we forgot. And we keep looking at each other in the roles that we were playing. So that's more or less what happens in devachan. We keep looking at souls in the roles that we have played in the last lifetime. Now, because devachan is a spiritual plane, we don't perceive, let's say, enemies. We only perceive people with whom we have ties of love. So all those people that we didn't love during life will be absent from our experience in devachan. We will only perceive those that we have generated a tie of love. So we will still look a little more into this. This is just to give you the general idea. So then Besant quotes again one of Blavatsky's teachers, who goes to Devachan, he was asked. The personal ego, of course, but beatified, purified, holy. So as I said, the entity that will be in Devachan after this personality dies, and I as a soul am in Devachan, if I'm still conditioned by my previous lifetime, this will be Pablo's Devachan. This is a continuation of the personal life. The personal life doesn't end with the physical body. The life of Pablo continues in Kamaloka and then continues in Devachan, and only after Devachan, the soul shakes off all memories of the life as Pablo and incarnates and generates a new personality. Now, that particular Pablo that will be in Devachan is the most spiritual version possible. Is as the master says here, is the personality stripped of any flaws, of any limitations. That personality will not have spiritual qualities that it didn't show during the physical life, but it will have only the spiritual qualities that it showed during the physical life, none of the selfish or ignorant, etc. qualities. So the one who experiences Devachan, we would say, is the purified personality. So the master continues, the fact of his being reborn in Devachan shows the preponderance of good over evil in his old personality. He brings along with him into Devachan the karma of his good deeds, words, and thoughts, while the bad karma steps aside for the time being to follow him in his future earth reincarnation. So because Devachan is a spiritual plane, there is no room for the negative karma. And the master will say bad karma is a relative term with us. You know, something that is bad for a soul at a certain period of evolution is not bad for a soul and at a different period of evolution. A child needs to develop a certain sense of selfishness because it's building that sense of I am this, and selfish attitudes that are normally unhealthy in children may be unhealthy in adults, for example. So similarly with the soul and the idea of what is good and what is wrong. But in any case, what the master is saying here is that because Devachan is a spiritual place, as I explained, only the spiritual causes generated, the good karma, the happy karma. Of course, good and bad, again, we tend to think that good karma is whatever I like and bad karma is what I don't like. The soul looks at this very differently. You know, good karma is whatever helps you move along the path of self-realization, whether that produces pain or joy is a secondary matter for the soul. So, you know, when we talk about good and bad karma, this comes with a lot of footnotes, you know. But basically, there is only room for happiness in Devachan. So all the causes that have to do with unpleasant karma, they wait, and the master says in one of his letters, they wait at the threshold of Devachan, outside Devachan. They wait the soul, when the soul comes out of Devachan and goes down, you know, into the physical plane to incarnate again, that's when the negative karma that was produced in previous incarnations comes and clings to the soul. So that's more or less what the master is saying here. And then he says, bad is a relative term for us, as I explained, and the law of retribution, which is the law of karma, is the only law that never errs. Hence, all those who have not slipped down into the mire of unredeemable sin and bestiality go to Devachan. In the Theosophical view, most people go to Devachan. only a person that has never felt love or something related to love, to anything, whether a pet or a person, only those people have nothing that they can hold on to experience some kind of devachan. Of course, the devachan of a person that had very little love during physical life will be very short and quite superficial, but it will be in a nice period of rest. On the other hand, a very spiritual person, the Vachan has a transformative effect on the soul. But in the Theosophical view, it is as difficult to not to have Devachan because the person was completely evil. It is as difficult to be in that situation as it is to be in the situation of reaching self-realization, reaching, enlightenment. So these two things are exceptional cases at the moment in evolution. Most people have some kind of devachan. So to go again with the example of the actor, because we are saying in devachan you only experience, or your experience in devachan is conditioned by only the good things in life. It is like if you are an actor and then you do the play, and in all your experience training for the play, and there are mixed experiences. There are some good experiences where you feel you got it, where you can express yourself perfectly, and there are bad experiences where you are frustrated, etc. Then you go to the actual play in front of people, and again there may be times of great success. There may be other times where that you missed a line or something, and it is as if after the play finishes, for some reason you forget all the mistakes, you forget all the sacrifice, and it's like this person that is so happy about how the play went that for a while that person is reliving that play and is enjoying all the people applauding and enjoying the sense of skill in doing. So sometimes that happens in our lives. When something great happened, we tend to forget everything else, and this keeps coming in our head, and we may be in a state of bliss and joy for a while. Or the opposite is also true. When something really difficult happens, then that also takes over our awareness, and we are in a little hell. This is what happens to people on the astral plane, people who were very selfish and cruel. They have that kind of experience on the astral plane until all that is worked out. And if they have some seed of goodness, then they will have some experience in Devachan. So, these analogies are very imperfect, and they can produce a lot of misunderstandings, because what I just said may give the impression that Devachan is just a rehashing of what happened in our physical life. And it's not that, it's far more. The allegory of, the actor just enjoying all the success in the play is good only at that level, at the level of how a person may still enjoy something that happened before, and maybe in a state of joy and ecstasy even, bathing in the experience that had just passed. Devachan, to some extent, is like that. Nature sorts out all the negative thing, and we just bathe in the best of our personal life. But it's not just the rehashing. In Devachan, we actually have a life. We generate new actions. But as we are going to see, all those actions are conditioned and limited by the experiences that we had in our previous life. So, for example, if we have a spiritual interest, when we are in Devachan, we continue to pursue that spiritual interest. And now we are doing this on a spiritual plane. So all the limitations and difficulties and finding, obstacles, etc., that we experience on the physical plane are not experienced on the spiritual plane. And we can actually further more our spiritual interest on the devachanic plane and experience that deeper and learn more. It's not just a rehashing of the previous, but if we never had that interest in physical life, let's say, to put an example, not necessarily something mystical. If we had an interest in art with the sense of expressing beauty with some spiritual intention, not just to be famous, rich, or supposing that you are very good and can get rich with art. But if you had some spiritual intention and you were interested in finding new ways to express beauty and new colors and new forms, then in Devachan you can continue to pursue that, and you understand in an even deeper way the principles of beauty. You generate ways of expressing beauty that are not possible on the physical plane, etc., etc. You delight yourself in being, almost a unconstrained artist. But that is only possible if you were interested in art during your physical life. If you were not, your Devachan will be different. There will not be art in your Devachan if your personality was not interested in that. So it can be in any field, whenever there is, or if there is no particular interest in a field. The same happens with relationship with people, and we will see this a little later. You can still relate to the people who you loved, but in a far deeper way than you ever could on the physical plane. And for many people, their Devachan is about relationships, not about a field of activity in particular. So we will continue to see that. So then Annie Besant goes to the illusion of Devachan. How is it that it is an illusion? As I mentioned, early ideas, many people thought that, these examples that I give you are examples that were given at the beginning of the Theosophical literature. And some people thought, okay, Devachan is just a rehash of, like a dream of the previous life, and all this sense of this being an illusion. So Annie Besant says, in early Theosophical literature, the Devachanic consciousness has been described as illusion, dream state, and other similar terms, which has produced difficulties to grasp the subject. In a deep metaphysical sense, all that is conditioned is illusory. All phenomena are literally appearances, the outer masks in which the one reality shows itself forth in our changing universe. So as we said, in Devachan, you are not connected directly to the soul as souls. You are connected to the soul, and we will see this a little later, but you can relate to people on the Devachanic plane. But as I explained, you relate to that soul in the role that you knew that soul in your previous life. So you can have a relationship with your parents or partners or children or friends, but you will have that relationship with the forms that you are actually relating to the soul of these people, but with the mask that you knew during Earth. So for this reason, Devachan is still a plane of illusion. You are not seeing the pure, bare reality, these two, let's say, naked souls, souls without these masks. Therefore, it is an illusion. But physical life is far more illusory than Devachan, because as we are going to see in physical life, there are many more bodies in between you and the soul. In Devachan, there is the the bare minimum of personal, let's call it envelopes around the soul compared to what happens on the physical plane. So only in nirvana, or at least in the plane beyond devachan, that is not quite nirvana, you begin to relate to people, to the universe, to yourself, beyond the level of illusion. Devachan is still within the realm of illusion. Now, as Annie Besant says, the more material and solid the appearance, because it is an appearance because that soul that you are relating to your partner in Devachan, the soul is taking the appearance of your partner, of the personality that you knew of your partner, for example. So the soul is appearing in a particular form that you recognize because you are still working, functioning in your personal consciousness. If you could perceive from the point of view of the soul, you will recognize the soul as a soul, not by means of the appearance of the previous personality. So Besant says, the more material and solid the appearance, the further it is from reality, and therefore the more illusory it is. So the physical appearance that all our souls take are far more illusory than that very subtle appearance that happens in Devachan. And we will see why. So she says, similarly, the less deeply the inner self is plunged into matter, the less unreal is his life. This is why he's nearer to the soul of things. Once he has shaken off the garments he donned at incarnation than he was before. So once we get rid of these lower bodies in the process of life after death, we are nearer to the soul of things. Not quite there, but we are nearer to the soul of things than we were on the physical plane. So just to put it in the form of a diagram, we have a soul. The soul in Theosophical literature is the source of spiritual qualities. There can be no evil at the level of the soul. There can be no ignorance at the level of the soul, in the sense that souls are evolving. So souls are not fully awakened and fully perfect. The only limitations that are at the level of the soul, the only negatives that are at the level of the soul, is simply potentialities that have not yet been developed. But there cannot be anything that is actively negative. All flaws, defects, limitations that we talk about, they really belong to the personality, to the mental body, to the emotional body, to the physical body. And the soul is devoid of anything like that. So if you know a person, you know a person on the physical plane, a person that you love, you perceive aspects of that person's soul, that person's essential individuality. But then that essential individuality is coming through bodies or vehicles of consciousness that impose their limitations. It's coming through a mental body, and mental bodies can be more or less developed. It's coming through an emotional body, and then it's coming to a physical body. So, for example, if you say, I love this person, but he or she is rather selfish, that selfishness is not part of the soul. That selfishness is a quality of that mental body that this soul has been trying to build incarnation after incarnation. Further, you may say, I love this person, but he or she is possessive. Again, that possessiveness has nothing to do with the real person, with the soul. Possessiveness or sadness or, criticism, any of these things really belong to our qualities of our emotional or mental body. Or you can say, I love this person, but he or she is so lazy. Laziness has nothing to do with the soul. It has to do with the body. So when we say that we are relating to our parents, our partners, our children, our friends, we are actually relating to all these superimposed layers that are not really what they are. And we love them because we recognize some of their essential qualities. It's like a flame of a candle of not quite good quality, and therefore the candle produces a lot of smoke. So you recognize the flame there, but the flame is surrounded by black smoke because the candle is not of a great quality. So similarly, in the process of evolution, we are in the process of purifying our bodies and also making them more organized so that they can express better and better what we really are. So when we are relating to people here on the physical plane, we are relating to a lot of superimposed, things that are not really part of the person. So if we go back, when that person gets rid of the body, of the emotions, of the lower mind, and when you do that, or when you do that and you are in Devachan, then you are relating to the soul. Again, in Devachan, we are still, you see the green line around. It's because it's not purely the soul, as I explained. It's the soul with a varnish of the best qualities of the personality, of the previous personality. But you are almost there. You are very close to the soul of things, as Annie Besant says. So for this reason, any relationship in Devachan is deeper than and closer to the real person than it could be on the physical plane. And the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that when a person is alive, suppose that your physical body dies, you are in Devachan, but your children are still alive. Because you are at the level on the plane of the souls, you can relate to the souls of your children, even if they are alive. The physical consciousness of the children may not know, but them as souls, they are relating to you on the Devachanic plane. So you don't relate only to people who have died. You relate to anything that has a soul. And because you are still conditioned by your previous lifetime, you will be related to the children that you had in this incarnation, that you generated bonds of love with them. Maybe there are other souls there, or not maybe, there are other souls there that may have been your children in a previous incarnation, but you don't recognize them because you are still conditioned by your last incarnation. Once you reach enlightenment, you will recognize, as Annie Besant said, all the souls that you have been related at any time, and you will feel the deep love for all the souls. This doesn't happen in Devachan. This is why, again, Devachan is still part of the illusion, but it's far less illusion than what you have in physical relationships, as we see, with all these layers. So Besant continues, even though veils of illusion still dim his vision, they are far thinner than those which clouded it when he was wrapped in the garment of the flesh. Therefore, it is truly said of the soul that has escaped from earth through the gate of death, that it has returned to its own place, for its home is the land of the gods, and here on earth it is an exile and a prisoner. So we are coming to the end. There are a couple more slides. Besant says, in a conversation reported by H.P. Blavatsky, when a master of wisdom was asked, would it not be better to say that death is nothing but a birth for a new life? He answered, this is how it really is. However, with the accepted views of material life, the words live and exist are not applicable to the purely subjective condition after death. Otherwise, you would soon arrive at the materialistic ideas which are common in our times. You see, when we describe, if we say you still live, in heaven, how have we in humanity in general imagined that life. You see in the Bible that heaven is described as having these pearly gates and streets of gold, and we visualize heaven with all the same conditions that we do on the physical plane. Or in Islam, a religion that was developed in the deserts of the Middle East, when they describe heaven, they describe it as with flowing springs of water, for example, because we imagine, what would be the ideal physical life, and then we impose that on the heavenly experience. So the master is saying, yes, we can say this is a new birth, but be careful not to materialize your conceptions of the afterlife. It's not that you will have, like the spiritualists used to talk about the summer land. I think it was them that would talk about the summer land, and it was very similar to their ideas of physical life. So this is something we have to keep in mind. Naturally, when we try to explain all this to our physical consciousness, we need to use words that are familiar to us. Otherwise, we wouldn't understand anything. But keep in mind that we are talking about planes that are far subtler and more spiritual than what we can conceive of in our physical life. So Besant says, the dread of materializing mental and spiritual conceptions has always been very strong among the philosophers and oral teachers of the Far East. They are ever seeking to spiritualize the material, while in the West, the continual tendency has been to materialize the spiritual. And then with this, we finish. Besant says, our gross physical matter is not there. The limitations imposed by it are not there. The mind is in its own realm, where to will is to create, where to think is to see. And this is a quote from the same teacher of Blavatsky. Life on the other side of the grave is one where there are no tears, no sighs, and where they just realize they are full perfection.